The Omnitrix is one of the most iconic objects that exist, and in different series throughout all the seasons of Ben 10, we have seen several versions or variants of this object, some of them more powerful than others. So today we are here to see which is the most powerful Omnitrix. We will be reviewing various versions or variants of this object, seeing its strengths and weaknesses to find the most powerful one. First of all, let's start with a small section of Omnitrix that were included in other Cartoon Network series. We can see the Omnitrix from Mad in a sketch where Benjamin Franklin gets this watch after being struck by lightning, and we can't see it too much, but apparently this watch has the aliens from the first and second seasons of Ben 10 aliens like Four Arms, Swamp Fire, Human Gaussor, and the others. So we can consider that this watch has a fairly good variety of aliens. In addition to the fact that for the time of this character, it makes him almost invincible, but other than that he does not stand out as much as other Omnitrix that we are going to see in this section. We are beginning with the Omnitrix of villains, which we were able to see in a small segment of this series where we can see that Bilgax is provided this Omnitrix that was customized by Flug. From the little we saw of it, it seems that it contains the DNA of some of the classic Cartoon Network villains, including Black Hat, which, as Flug said, is the most powerful DNAs that exist, although this transformation does not seem to work well, but despite this, I think that this Omnitrix has a lot of potential. Alpha's Ultimatrix was seen in the crossover chapter of Generator Rex and Ben 10 called Heroes United. Here Ben meets Rex, where Alpha, the enemy of this chapter, scans and duplicates the Ultimatrix so that it can transform into the different aliens from the Omnitrix. In this chapter we only see the transformations of Fire, Mongosaurus and Four Arms, giving them a much more monstrous and intimidating appearance with very strong attacks. Adapting to Alpha, I see quite a lot of potential in this version since Alpha's abilities combined with the power of the Ultimatrix could form a very powerful version of the Omnitrix. And to finish with this Omnitrix section seen in other Cartoon Network series, we go with the one seen in OK Co, which is an Omnitrix used by Ben which was taken to this dimension. This Omnitrix that, like the previous ones we can see for a very short time, has the ability to transform Ben in any of the well-known Cartoon Network heroes. In the chapter, we see that Ben transforms into Jake, Proteus, Uncle Grandpa, Finn, among many other heroes of this company, making this version of the Omnitrix have a variety of powers and quite good abilities thanks to the heroes it transforms into. So for me, this is one of the most powerful versions of this device, so that's why I place it as the strongest in this section. Now let's see the strongest Omnitrix seen in Ben 10 series from the weakest to the strongest, starting with we start with a Omnitrix, which is not a former Omnitrix, but has practically the same purpose. This was created by the Dr. Psych Boss in Ben 10 Omniverse, and like the Omnitrix, it is capable of transforming the user into aliens, with the difference that these aliens are a kind of predator of the Omnitrix's aliens, which did put Ben in trouble sometimes since these aliens were very dangerous. But this is so low because since first of all this device transforms the user into non-intelligent beings, which means that the transformations cannot be controlled very well. Another disadvantage is that if the Omnitrix is used by any human or an intelligent species, it can cause memory loss or mutations with prolonged use, and that is why it should only be used by a non-intelligent species like the dog from Kyber, which I think is the only one that was able to get the most out of this device without receiving the side effects. And this also has the typical recharge time that can somewhat limit the use. So I put the Omnitrix as the weakest of all these Omnitrix simply because of these disadvantages that it has. We go now with Kenny's Omnitrix seen in the chapter called Ken 10 of the original series. This Omnitrix is a direct copy of the first one that came out in the series from Ben 10 that Ben 1 made for his son. Even though this Omnitrix is a copy of the original, It has some disadvantages since first of all it had a limiter which did not allow the user to change the alien to another or stay with one for a long time. But this disadvantage was removed by Ken himself by hacking the Omnitrix with gray matter. So unless Ben had not added this alien to the list, he would not even have this disadvantage. Second, is that Ben only put 10 aliens thinking that his son could escape. He put aliens that we say are more defensive. That is to say that some of these are quite good, and we don't know a few others. But at least for me, I feel that he lacks a little more aliens for fights or brute force aliens, such as 4 arms or very large ones, which, as I say, could be very useful in battle. So for me, this is the biggest disadvantage that this Omnitrix has, which is quite good, but is surpassed by the number of aliens among other advantages of the following positions. We continue with the Gwen Omnitrix, which we saw in the chapter called The Beginning of the Last, and also at the end of 10 Omniverse. This Omnitrix, like the previous one, is like the original only apart from the changes in terms of colors. This belongs to Gwen. I didn't place this one higher in the video since apart from the fact that we didn't see it much, it seems to have the same functions or transformations that the original Omnitrix had. But it doesn't stand out as much, and if we compare it with another could be left behind, maybe I would raise it a place or two. Gwen's watch in the comments. The Omnitrix is another evil version of the Omnitrix seen in the reboot of the series created by none other than that Kevin. This one is capable of transforming Kevin into only 11 aliens, which is not much, but the aliens he transforms into are very interesting and have a very great potential, since I feel that they are quite nerfed by the childish tone that the series has. The aliens in this watch would be like the counterpart of Ben's aliens in the reboot. But some of these have another appearance and abilities that could be better for combat, since for example some of the aliens have peaks, armors, extra powers or thorns that the vent aliens do not have, making them a little superior in some aspects. It also has another extra alien called Bashmut, which is an original alien of this device. This watch does not have a time limit, but it does have an energy limit, making the transformations take a good time but not very long. Apart from that, it does not have any other extra function or anything like that. But as I said before, I see great potential in it. And I found it very interesting the different forms of the transformations of these aliens, being for me capable of surpassing Ben's classic aliens in some aspects, and that is why I place it here. The Hero Watch is one of the many variants of the Omnitrix seen in Ben 10 Omniverse. This is more similar to the original watch only with the difference in colors, and also apparently this one came with 23 aliens instead of just 10, giving a greater advantage to the user if we compare it with the limitation of 10 or 15 aliens that had the most basic Omnitrix of that time, apart from the 23 aliens that this Omnitrix was supposed to have by default. This Ben mentions that he actually has a larger amount, although we were not able to observe this repertoire of aliens very well. But having more alien means a greater amount of abilities, being able to adapt better to certain situations. But the extra aliens are not the only advantage or differentiator of this watch, since it also has the quick change function with which the user can immediately change to another alien or detransform. And also, as we saw in a chapter, this can be linked to another Omnitrix to obtain aliens that it did not have. I think that although not all the repertoire of aliens of this watch for me, they put it above the previous ones since it has certain advantages a little more notable. Let's see the original Omnitrix, which we saw the entire first series, and also in Alien Force, where it took on another aspect thanks to a recalibration, and yes, we could take them as two different watches, but I would like to put them in the same position since they compensate in certain things, making them somewhat similar. So first of all we have the classic Omnitrix, the usual one which has the first 10 aliens plus one or another that was sneaked in as the series progressed, this as we already know. At the beginning it had some disadvantages such as use time or waiting time, and some other bugs such as hybrid aliens or involuntary transformations. Over time Ben accessed the master control which removed these disadvantages. making it much more useful later when Ben was recalibrated and was able to access a new variety of aliens which compensated quite well for the departure of the previous ones in all possible aspects, such as intelligence, speed, among others. The aliens of this recalibrated Omnitrix had very good characteristics, also having one of the most powerful transformations in the entire saga, which of course is Alien X. These Omnitrixes don't have many more things like power-ups or things like that, but still I consider that they are one of the best in this series. We came with the Omnitrix, which for me is one of the most overrated Omnitrix there is since it has more disadvantages than advantages. But well, let's see what this watch offers. First of all, it was originally developed by Asmai, but Albedo stole it in order to complete the project. It offers everything that we already know about the Omnitrix, which are the transformations of the different aliens that were known up to that point in the series, in addition to other advantages such as recharging, restarting and transforming without having to touch the watch. The most notable of these advantages and why I think this watch is so overrated are the evolutionary functions, since this watch is capable of evolving like Digimon to aliens, thus reaching their supreme form, granting advantages such as a new appearance, even skills or powers with weapons and a bunch of new abilities, which is quite good and a little broken. And that is why I don't put it lower in the video, but at the same time I don't put it higher since this Omnitrix is not perfect, and I know that each of these models has its flaws and none is perfect. But I think that this ones are quite big. First, nothing. Something that may not seem very important is that this Omnitrix restores the user's clothing to the original clothing. As I say, this may seem very simple, but it endangered Ben on a couple of occasions. Also, apparently this has a terrible security system since we saw in a chapter that it was hacked quite easily. But the biggest problem that this watch has is with the supreme forms, since in addition to spending the energy of the Omnitrix faster due to an error, these forms they were able to develop their own consciousness, endangering Ben himself, which I think is not worth having if they are going to turn against you. The truth is that it had a lot of potential because it was practically an incomplete version of the original idea that was had, since several problems arose that prevented it from taking advantage of its maximum potential. So well, I decided not to leave it so low in the video, but not so high due to those bugs. With this Omnitrix we would be reaching the top 4 of the most powerful versions, and as you already saw, I put Ben 1's Omnitrix from the original series. We could see this in a couple of chapters where we were shown the evolution of Benny as he learned to take complete control of his Omnitrix, also including new improvements in this watch. It is supposed to have 10,000 alien forms unlocked, and I say it is assumed because Ben 1's always uses the same 5 transformations with 1 or 2 more. This Omnitrix, apart from having all the new aliens, it also has the Master Control unlocked, allowing it Ben can change alien at will without having to touch the clock and almost just thinking about it. It also doesn't seem to have a time limit. It may have some energy limit, but this is not shown in the chapters where it is. One of the most interesting features. What this Omnitrix has is that Ben was able to add nanotechnology to each of his aliens, which gives him a fairly large plus compared to his previous versions, making these aliens more technologically advanced. In addition, without having any type of power-up like the Supreme Forms or something like that, it seems that Ben masters this Omnitrix quite well, and it allows him to kill each of his enemies. The Omnitrix from the reboot at the beginning of the series is very similar to that of the original series, with the occasional alien being replaced. Although I feel that this one, in terms of energy and errors, it surpasses the original quite a bit. As the series progresses, it gets some improvements that solve these problems, and that give the aliens a very interesting extra, such as the Omni improvement, which allowed the aliens to have some improvement with the power of shock rock, adding either an armor, weapons or some extra limbs for Ben's aliens, which I thought were very good. Later these improvements disappeared to make way for the Omnitrix armor, which grants new abilities and powers to Ben's aliens in addition to a considerable improvement in their resistance. When it comes to combat, and here I have the same feeling that I mentioned with Kevin's watch from this same series, and I feel that because of the childish tone one does not get to appreciate how powerful these improvements can be. Now the disadvantage with these improvements is that the Omnitrix's energy runs out much faster, making these transformations not last as long as I would like, but otherwise I think that these power-ups that were given to Ben's aliens are quite good, and I think they were a little overshadowed by the hate that is given to this version. Let's see in the comments what you think of the reboot of the series. We would reach the top 2 of this video with the definitive Omnitrix, which was seen at the end of Alien Supremacy, and throughout Omniverse this version of the Omnitrix fixes many bugs of previous versions, also having a large number of very varied and powerful aliens, showing some of the classics and others of the newest ones with very interesting powers. This one is technologically much more advanced than the previous ones, with many new functions such as the selection hologram, the tracking function, among others. This can also allow the user to change aliens at will with their certain energy limit. And as I said before, this Omnitrix solves many of the errors of previous versions. It's just that it is not as noticeable, because Ben is often always hitting its core, causing it to transform into an alien he didn't want to transform. Going through one of the things that seemed quite curious to me about this Omnitrix is the kind of life insurance it has, which is a function that is executed in this device to protect the user, transforming it into the most optimal alien to survive that specific situation, which for me gives it a fairly big plus, and at least it is the only one I have seen that does this. Also, if we can also count this green thing that was with Ben for a short time. But the improvements he gave to the Omnitrix are undoubtedly very good, since with it Ben could obtain some other ability from a specific alien simply by being transformed into another. Then even though this one does not have any more power-ups or anything like that, I feel that the number of aliens and the correction of bugs or problems make it an excellent second place for this video. This more than a watch looks like a kind of bracelet that Ben uses on both arms to give it a pretty broken use, although I feel like it gets nerfed a lot when it is used for the sake of the plot. The use of the Omnitrix is to be able to perform fusions of the different aliens that Ben 10,000 possesses, allowing him to make a large number of combinations. That is, the concept of fusions had already been explored in the series, but it never turned out very well. So the fact that this device is capable of creating fusions at will, and without failures, makes it one of the most powerful by default. It is also made clear that with just one of these bracelets Ben could transform into the normal aliens of a lifetime, which, by the way, I suppose that in this version of the Omnitrix also has 10,000 or more aliens available. But well, why would you want to transform into a normal alien having the option of fusion? Although it is true that not everything can be perfect in this life, since even though it has no flaws like other watches, this one still has energy limitations. In addition, the fusions are mainly done with the DNA of the weakest alien, making it not completely removed. The potential of the fusions, which is still quite broken, but as I say, it is not used at its 100% is, but even with those disadvantages. For me, this version of the Omnitrix can beat several of the previous ones, making it the most powerful we have seen so far. Although I would like to know what you think if you have made it this far. Write to me your top 3 most powerful Omnitrix in the comments that I will be reading. See you next time, and remember to leave your opinion.